What follows is a project on keying a couple of master number 6121 padlocks to a client's existing key. Okay, let's take a look at my box where I keep my cards and my tools for the machine. I've got a wrench in there that I use just for changing the cutter. This is my box of code cards, binder, the socket I use for changing the cutter, other cutters, etc. Okay. Let's take a look at what C34 and C35 have. I've always been meaning to set these in numerical order, but I don't believe I ever did. And I can see there's a pack of 4, and I've never opened that. Okay. I'm going to pause this while I look for the cards. Okay, so we have located them, C34 and C35. I'm going to stare at this really quick. There are apparently 6 depths in this system, in a small pin system, which is card C34. What I don't know is the effective plug diameter. So here it is. You just study up here. You're going to see where the pins are called out as a number, and then the actual length is indicated there as well. So actually beautiful. Assuming that 0 is the shortest pin and 6 is the longest, we have everything that we need to know, because here's why. If 0 and 1 are the pins, 1 and 2 are the short pins, you'll notice that the inch here is greater than like what would most likely be a long pin. That's because this column is the root depth. So what that means is I should be able to measure these cuts. It tells us what cutter we would use. I'm not going to originate a key. I'm just going to duplicate it. Depth and spacing data number 049, we looked at that. Our increment is 15 thousandths, which means it's a single step 7 depth system. Client said 0 through 9, which is a 2-step 10 depth system. Why I know that is related to the increment. So we think that these are root sizes, and I wish the effective plug diameter was on here, but it's not. Probably won't matter. So let's switch the camera around. We're going to make an educated guess as to what we're going to do. So I'm going to measure. I hope that it's small pin. Actually, I don't think it is. I think it's what they call large pin. One thing I didn't point out to you is it tells you what key blanks you can use, and that W1 is not anything that's familiar on this, so it might be a C35 card. That's part of locksmithing. You just literally learn by discovery. So we're going to have the first cut, assuming shoulder to bow to tip, I should say. That's 0.213. Okay. All right, tells me we're probably dealing with a C135 because 0.213 doesn't really even play well on a C34 card. So I'll put the C34 card away. So what I'm going to do is record these 4 cuts as we go along, and I'll tell you why in a moment. First cut. Assuming bow to tip, 0.207. Let's just go with that. 0.207. Next cut. It does not look like it's the same cut. 1. 0.203 on the second cut, and the third looks just like it. Yeah, 0.194. So 2.194. 3.194. 4 looks like it's 0.232. Okay, 0.232. Now, my caliper is accurate, meaning when you use a caliper, you're going to get pretty accurate dimensions. A 207, a 0.207, the first cut, that kind of makes sense for it to be, is it a 4 or a 5? I have no idea. I first measured it at 213, and the problem is this is not an original blank, and this has all been cut down. you can see evidence of them actually cutting the top of the key blank here. I would like to measure this, but I can't because it's not original, because I can take a factory original cut. Let's actually look at this. That's a cut there, and it measures 0.272. Okay, that would be a 0 cut. So this is O-bitted. So when I measure one of these cuts from the root to the depth of the cut, I'm getting 0.274. And a 0 is a 0.275. So I'm thinking these are what's called O-bitted. They're cut to zeros. 0 is actually a cut. So what they've done is they've cut here. I can't measure the height of the blade itself because it's been altered. Meaning, if I had an original Elder's key blank, I could measure that. My guess is that the overall height of the blade itself is not exact. So that's where the, please, Mr. Client, don't tell me locksmithing, because it's impossible for you to understand without walking a path or a journey over years and years of exploration that you would understand what you're saying. So when I measure that first cut again, I'm really wanting to see a number closer to 200 or 215, and I'm getting 210. So that's really going to push me towards a number 4. So I'm going to think possibly the bitting 4, 2 and 3 are 0.194s, closer to a 5, and then 232, that's really close to a 3. So based on the decimal information on the card, comparing it to what I've written here, you can understand that if I were to tell the client, yeah, cut yourself a 4553, it ain't going to work, or it may not work. And how you would do that on the Blitz or an originator is you're going to cut your card, you're going to cut your key such that you're lining up needles on the machine to the depths, which are here. Okay, so I can't tell you how many times I've referred to HPC code cards or the depth and spacing data because they have so much amazing information. It's priceless. I use the cards as reference material more than I use the Blitz to originate keys. Okay, so now the next thing to do is to get the pin kit out. And let's disassemble a padlock. Now what I should be doing first is duplicating the key. That's actually the very first thing to do, because when I go to combinate it, I want to make sure that I've got a key. I don't want to combinate it and then come back after the fact to cut the key. So the next thing I'm going to do actually is physically cut a key. I've got my C35 here. I'm going to leave it on the side so that we can get access to it. We'll get our machine, we'll cut a copy, and we'll go from there. So let's do it. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Okay, Jim, I wanted to extend our conversation of earlier this week and give you an education as to what bitting is so that you understand better how to best service and maintain your existing key system. So, this is the key that you sent me. Okay. Now, once we know the keyway, this is a W1, by the way, and with accessing some information, which is called the depth and spacing data, I should be able to determine the information that you want to know, that you would probably know as the bitting. Okay, I mentioned in our conversation effective plug diameter. That's like a nominal diameter of the plug that the key goes into. There's a theoretical diameter, a nominal diameter. There's then the length of the pin tumbler that goes in and sits right into the cut. What's left is the root diameter, from the bottom of the cut to the bottom of the blank. Root plus pin tumbler length basically equals effective plug diameter. Now, I have my caliper here. I don't know what cuts these are. I don't do a lot of master work at all. I'm going to measure the first cut. The cut nearest the shoulder. That's the shoulder right there. Okay, I'm going to measure that cut. Here's why I'm measuring what I can measure, because I can't measure the rest. It's all cut away, so I have to measure the root. So the root's giving me about 0.207. 0.207 is what the root is giving me. 0.207. If you would, write that down. 0.207. Okay, great. Effective plug diameter minus root equals bitting. Now, the depth and spacing data that I had mentioned earlier can be found online, probably from multiple sources. I know where to find it on the HPC website. HPC is a manufacturer of key machines primarily, but other locksmithing related items, especially tools. I have their HPC Blitz, which is probably it's doesn't matter what it is, but it's a tool that you would use to originate keys. You would originate keys. Now, I also have an original Master 291 pin kit. This is the pin kit that you'll use to accommodate Master. In that pin kit is a depth gauge. And how these work, you may have seen them. You put the key in and you slide it till it stops, and that's the cut on the key. That's your bitting. Okay? Now remember 0.207, right? Okay. What we do now is, I don't know the effective plug diameter. I don't have it memorized. I don't know. But I know I got 0.207. Now, the depth and spacing data is contained in multiple locations. One of those locations is the depth card or the cutting card for the HPC machine. This is an HPC C35 card. What's really amazing about this is it gives us a ridiculous amount of valuable data. Like, it's the keys to the kingdom. I want to get that up here so you can see it with me. We'll go through it together. Now, you'll note this is an 8-depth single-step system. You had mentioned cuts 0 through 9, and I said that's a 2-step 10-depth system. This is a single-step 7-depth system. There's science behind how I know that. It's not really necessary for you to know it because you're not a locksmith. However, the 0.015 is how I know it's a single step. Now, this is the data. This column here is what you're expecting to hear, 0 through 7. Okay. Now, the depth column here is the one that I can deal with. That's my root depths. But you'll notice a 5 is 0.200 and a 4 is 0.215. There is no 0.207. There's no 0.207. So that is basically splitting the difference between a 4 and a 5. Measuring your key, I don't know what your bitting is. So what else can we do about that? Well, there's a couple of things. Let's go over it right now. I got a key gauge here. That came with the kit. Okay, let's go to that. I'm going to slide in that first cut, which is 0.207, and see where it stops. Aha. It stops on a 5 is where it stops. It stops at 5. Now, what's really cool about that is I wrote 5 down for that first cut. I also wrote 0.207. So I go to combinate this, meaning I take this all apart and these are already keyed. Your key works these. Okay, this is done. This job is done. I go to load a 5-pin because that's what the manufacturer's original tool tells me it is. And guess what? It's too long. That 5 cut is too long. That 5-pin tumbler is too long. A 5 is going to measure, well, I can measure it. I was about to say I don't know what it measures because I don't know the effective plug diameter. It's not on the card, which is probably the only thing not on the card. But I have a 5-pin here. I can just measure it. And we'll basically then have a good idea of what plug diameter is. So when I grab that 5-pin, that's what I'm getting. What is that, 0.189? Yeah, 0.189. 0.189 plus 207. 0.189, 207, 619. 396. So the effective plug diameter is probably about 0.4 something inch. So when I went to combinate that and this, if I were to disassemble that, which I won't do, you'll have to take my word for it, and pull the first pin out of there and measure it, you'll see that it's a 4, which measures 15 thousandths less than this. So 174 is what it would measure. 0.174. So the moral of the story is, and I realize how extremely didactic I was in the conversation, but it's not simple. This is at least a second generation key. It does not look like it's been used very much. But when I measure this, I don't know if it's a 4 or a 5. The only way that I was able to determine the correct bitting is what pins actually worked. So here's what happened. Chambers 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is a 4-pin chamber. Those are the dimensions that I measured. 0.207, 0.194, 0.194, something, 232. That's the root that I measured. So effective plug diameter minus root is the pin. Okay, so what I concluded it was, based on that data, knowing, based on my experience as a, air quotes, locksmith, I don't go out in the field every day, that kind of stuff. Based on my experience as a locksmith, I concluded your bitting was 4553. That's what I concluded your bitting was. When I took that key gauge and I measured your key, sure enough, I didn't get that. I got 5, 6, 6, 4. One step bigger in every space. When I gauged it, I got 5664, not 4553. So I said, boy, the key gauge has got to be right. I was right in the middle between a 4 and a 5, let's say. So let's go to the longer one, which I know in my head probably not going to work because the pin's too long. Dropped it in, sure enough, the key wouldn't turn because the pin is too long. That's where it comes to filing pins. No. If you have to file pins, you replace worn parts. So I can tell you this. Your bitting is 4553 because those are the pins that I dropped in there and it worked. I measured this key blank. Those measurements are here. If you went to someone and said, originate me a key using your HPC key originator to 4553, you already know that the root depths are going to be different. A 4 is 0.215, and I measured 0.207. A 5 is 0.2, and I measured 0.194 in both of those spots. A 3 is 0.230, and I measured 0.232. I had said 0.003 is really the cutoff. If you're more than that, it's not going to work really well. The point being is if you have somebody originate the key to that bitting, 4553, the root depths need to be what's on this card. This is the actual data. Your key's probably not going to work. It may work. And if it does, it's only because of the inherent lack of tight tolerances in the cylinder plug and the shell itself. There's slop. And that's normal. You have to have slop. In the sense that a 10-pound bag will not hold 10 pounds of sausage. It'll rip. You need to have 9.99 pounds of sausage. That 0.01 is the slop. There's enough slop or play or lack of really tight machining tolerances such that you are off 0.008 in 2 instances and 0.006 in 2 instances. So that's really actually not insignificant. 0.008. You can't see through there, but you can see daylight through my tool. Depending on, see it? You can see daylight right through the tool. The point of the matter is that in other lock platforms, you cannot be off that much and have it still work. It will not work. So, why take the time to send this to you? 1, because I want you to understand how it actually works. 2, know that 4553 is your bitting. If you originate a key to it, it may work, and it may not work. 3, this is not an original blank. Don't use non-original blanks, because if this Elder's key blank was in my hand and I put as a blank, not cut, and I put my caliper on it and measured it, and I measured it against an original master blank, they're probably going to be a little different. Use only original blanks, most certainly when you're originating keys. Sooner or later what will happen is, let's imagine that this key was 10 years old, and then I tried to determine the bitting. I'm really not going to know what the original bitting is, because this is very worn, because my root depth will give me a different dimension than it did today, say 10 years in the future. My reference data won't change, but my bitting based on root dimension could be different. So the moral of the story is you probably could get to a position where, yeah, you got keys that no longer really work. Because one key is very worn, you've keyed padlocks to a second generation non-original key, and other stuff may or may not work. And this may work till the end of time for you without any trouble. But it does get to a point where you kind of do have to stop and replace all the worn parts, which means you know the bitting. It's probably 4553. Record that. You can originate. I can originate keys because I've got the tool, I've got the data, I've got the card, and I've got factory original blanks. I can make them all day long. I can cut it on my originator. I can measure the root and know if I'm accurate. But when you get stuff that's worn, you gotta dump all the worn stuff and just take your locks, new cut keys to your bitting, fresh keys to 4553, fresh pin tumblers in there that are brand new, not worn down, and you're back in business. The bottom line is, though, is if you've got padlock A that gets used 3 times a month, and you've got padlock B that gets used 3 times a minute, you'll have different wear rates. Anyway, awesome. Thank you very much for the business. I hope that we continue doing more of it, and keep us in mind. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.